Well, that took me up to 50 minutes. So I think I'll just stop here and let you guys ask any questions or talk or however you want to do it.
Do that. First question is from Jennifer Faust. I believe this has been answered, but how often do you test for mites?
Yeah, every 30 days is a good point of reference for me because a brood cycle for the bees is, around 21 days. And so I figure every 30 days is going to let me capture another generation to see how many more mites are emerging from that generation. So every 30 days.
Very good. Another one from an Eric Hahn. I just introduced a new queen this past weekend. How long should I wait to inspect the hive after her release when she was out of the cage for at least 4 days to see how she was doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, as long as she's acclimated to the new colony, I would say I always kind of go a little further with that because not everybody has the greatest eyesight to see queens. I'm one of them. I mean, to see eggs. Eggs are hard to see without eye assistance. So sometimes I'll tell people, wait 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, you might even see capped over pupae. But if you're too antsy about it, then go in there and see what you can see and make sure she's laying. But obviously, I would wait about 7 to 10 days just so you can have a better visual on some older looking larvae and not have to look for eggs.
Very good. One question from Mickey Lee. Can the inspection sheet be posted for download either on Facebook or website or someplace?
I know what I'm trying to do is I've thought about this a lot, and I'm going to try to make a way to do that. I'm going to try to make a YouTube video soon about inspection, and I'm going to make that as an available download on that YouTube video. So if they can watch for that, I think that's what I'll do.
Very good. I've seen items on YouTube and other channels that is available for download.
Exactly. Yeah.
In PDF format.
Yeah, I should be able to do that.
All right. Question from Valerie Mertz. Do you have tips for storing frames and boxes during winter to avoid moths?
Yeah, I have that question asked a lot. There's really only one successful way, but not everybody has that ability. That's what's frustrating. But the best way to do it is to put them in a freezer and you're done. But not everybody has a freezer that big. So if you can freeze them late in the year, you want to kill the wax moth eggs and larvae and the small hive beetle eggs and larvae. Freezing kills the eggs. Paradichlorobenzene doesn't kill the eggs, so they can always kind of come out of that. But I just think it's great to freeze them. Maybe you can find a friend that has a deep freezer or something, or somebody has a big walk-in freezer. You can set them in there for a week. Then you could take them out, take them back home, and store them in a place where you're not going to have ants and moths and everything get into them, and mice. Store them in a garage or something that's kind of sealed off. But that's the best way to do it. I don't want to put them in black, trash bags. They get too moldy. I remember one person told me I don't have any place to store them. I said, well, you need to store them in a temperature controlled place. I said, is your bedroom temperature controlled? And they were like, yeah. It's like, well, put them next to your bed. And she said, I don't think my husband's going to like that. But, you got to kind of take care of that. And it's so fun when you come out of winter and you've got good comb ready to go again. It's so depressing when you open it up and look at it and it's been eaten up by wax moths or beetles or, coming alive in there. Try to freeze them and then try to store them.
Very good. That's exactly what I do, is freeze them.
Yeah.
Where do you recommend getting new keepers where do you recommend beekeepers getting bees locally? And that's a question since you live in Illinois, you can't really answer.
Yeah, I know. I have a lot of people that will pick up bees from us and nooks from us that come from a long way off. And I kind of wish they wouldn't. I really would rather people, stay local to where they're at, not to get local stock necessarily, but I think it's easier on bees not to be transported a long distance. But I think local clubs have to have connections on where these providers are, these nook providers or package bee providers are. A lot of people are bringing packages up, out of the South more than ever. And I think that's fine. You just have to make the right connections. I personally think it's important to follow these providers. I'll get on a little hobby horse here, but I think these providers need to be following all the necessary Department of Ag, natural resources. They need to follow all those rules. They need to have things inspected. If they're bringing them across state lines, they need to have moving permits out of Florida. That ensures that those bees were inspected for any exotic strains of genetics like Africanized bees and all. So, we stay to the strictest inspections on all of those. We have paperwork, documentation, inspections. I just don't recommend anybody just get packages and nukes from people that don't have the proper paperwork. So you'll just have to do your due diligence, network around, talk to clubs, find out who's got good bees.
I just want to interject that the EMBA sells 200 nucleus colonies and 200 queens every year. So if you're a member of the club, check the website out.
That's really good.
Question from John Rayner. What is winter bee kind?
Oh, a winter bee kind is something I invented. I wanted to find a way to feed bees in the wintertime. And I read some old literature about candy boards. And I read some of Reverend Langstroth's work that he was doing in Ohio on overwintering bees. And he was frustrated with this whole concept. And what the candy boards were a great idea, I thought, when I read about them. And you can look at ABC XYZ book, and it talks about candy boards in there. And I thought, good, this is really great. But then I realized if you just feed bees sugar, it's not really good for them. We think that it is, but it's really not. Bees need proteins and minerals, just like they do when they gather pollen during the spring. That's their protein. And so I found a way. It's really quite hilarious. When I first made it, I put a pollen patty in a winter bee kind on a board of insulation. Then I poured my candy mixture on top. And then it kind of like was the old Tootsie Roll style that you eat through the candy to get to the Tootsie Roll in the middle, the chewy chocolate. I kind of made them like that. But now I found a way to just infuse the proteins and the minerals, everything that I need in with this sugar. And it's a really tricky thing. We spent a whole year trying to get that mixture right so that when the bees' body heat hits it, it begins to dissolve and the bees can consume both the sugar and the protein during the winter time. So it's a big slab of food that sits on top of the bees all winter long. And it has the insulation to cut down on the barrier that causes condensation in the wintertime. And it has ventilation at the top, which was really interesting because when I first invented it, it was getting rid of the moisture inside the hive and it was forming icicles. The moisture in the hive was coming out through that little vent and forming icicles. So bees need to really be dry, believe it or not. They need about 50% of moisture around the brood area, but they need to be dry in the wintertime too. So that helps with that.
Do you have information concerning that on your YouTube channel?
Oh yeah, you type in David Burns, winter bee kind, boom.
Very good. Holly Drainer asked, what do you think of the flow hive?
The flow hive is, I feel very fortunate that we have inventors today that are trying to find new ways to make things better for beekeepers. I think that's awesome. They did a great job. I think it is I think we have to be careful to realize it's really just an extraction hive. It's just, they're changing the way you extract the honey out. The hive still has to be managed the same way. You still have to watch for mites. You still have to manage it like any other hive. So think of it this way. You got a farmer and he's out there milking his cows by hand. And one day somebody comes up with the suction line that you can put in the barn and move all the honey off the cow or move all the milk off the cows into the tank. He doesn't have to do anything, hook up, whatever. It's kind of like that. It's like, you still got to take care of the cow. You still got to feed the cow, look for diseases among the cow. You got to keep the cow clean and healthy and all that. Same way with the flow hive. Manage your colony, And if you want to extract the honey using their method of extraction, it sounds like a good way to me.
Very good. Ann Cummings, what books or videos do you recommend for new beekeepers?
Oh, my book. Backyard Beekeeping, how to start your first hive. We do have a book on for that. For the book that Sherry and I wrote, the publishing company came to us and wanted us to write a beginner's book for the person that says, I don't know anything at all about bees, but I might want to start. So write a book about that. And so we wrote a book for them, and I think it was last year. And it's on Amazon. If you just type in David and Sherry Burns, Backyard Beekeeper, you'll see that book. But there are a lot of other great books out there. If the internet's full of great books. I really think if you're like somebody like Bob, I know Bob has a real interest in drilling down deep into beehives. That's the master beekeeper himself. I think Clarence Collison's book on What Do You Know is an unbelievably good book. It covers almost every subject in depth. I love that book. It's kind of difficult to read in that it has questions and then the questions are answered later. But that book's available on Amazon. But just a word of warning, it is a very intense book. It goes into really deep subjects. So it depends on where you're at in your learning style, what you want to read.
Thank you. Eve Riley asks, what do you do about an extremely aggressive hive?
Run. Run fast. So I've had hives that were very, very aggressive, and they weren't Africanized, but they were just aggressive. And there was nothing I could do to, stop that. That's just their genetic makeup. I kept them that way because they were such good honey producers, healthy bees. And so I just put up with them. So what I did was I just suited up better, and I had more smoke, and I knew I was more deliberate in my inspection. I knew exactly what I had to do. I didn't dilly-dally around, got the job done, get out of there. The longer I kept that hive open, the more aggressive they became. And so, of course, I live out in the country, and so it's like a half a mile to my neighbors. So I don't have to worry about that. But if I was in town and I had those kind of bees, I think I would requeen her. I think I'd take that aggressive queen out and find someone that has a better queen. And within 45 days, the genetics, those bees that die off, new genetics, those will be much more gentle bees. So always requeen. Don't put up with angry hives. That's no fun.
Okay, question from Jennifer Faust. When does the honey flow end in the St. Louis area?
What do you guys think? I don't know St. Louis that well.
I would say the end of June, depending on the.
Oh, wow.
Well,
even your clover?
Clover lasts sometime longer.
Okay. Well, what kind of honey flow do you have now until the end of June? What items?
What I've experienced, real good.
And I mean, what resources, what floral sources?
A lot of clover. I'm in an suburban environment. A lot of people plant gardens in the neighborhood.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've got a kind of a forest in the backyard. I've got a big stand of goldenrod that'll come in near the end of summer.
Yeah. Okay. That's kind of typical of what we have here. Yeah.
All right. Another question from Jackie. How do you inspect for queen cells when the hive is very big and strong? Do you mostly lift up the hive bodies and look between the boxes? If so, what are the chances that you might miss some queen cells?
Yeah, you read that a lot in the older literature, that the easiest way to look for queen cells is just take your first deep, tilt it up, and look on the bottom of the frames, between the frames, see if you see any queen cells on there. That's really iffy. That's really hard. Gosh, I can lift a frame out of that hive she's talking about, the real strong one. I can hold the frame in front of me and look at it, and I don't see a queen cell. But if I move my bees around, there's 12 queen cells on it. So, it's so hard. I totally agree with that, how frustrating that is. You literally have to go hand-to-hand combat on frame to frame and look for those queen cells if you really want to be diligent about it. There's no way to, I mean, if you kind of just want to take a quick glance, but all it takes is a 1 or 2 misses and the whole thing swarms tomorrow. So you really do have to stay on that.
Let's see here. Chrissy Johnson asks, what mite count do you treat at, and what would you use with supers on?
I don't like to treat with anything with supers on, but I know you can use things like formic acid. Mite Quick Strip allows you to keep the supers on, and that is really that formic acid is a good treatment method on getting rid of mites. It is really good, and you can use it with supers on. It's 59 to 89 degrees roughly on the daytime temps on that for 5 days. But then you also have to deal with that actually kills below the cap cells as well. So that's an added benefit, the mites that are below cap pupa. But as far as, controlling mites with supers on, that's just that period of time. I know a lot of beekeepers don't control mites while the supers on because they do use other chemicals that require supers off. So it's just something that you'd have to decide how to handle that. Okay. I would say, back to the first part of the question, what's the mite count, I believe. Mite count is funny. We usually say, if you have 3 mites or less out of 100 bees, that's kind of a threshold. But if you multiply that out, that gets to be like, 1,200 mites or something. It's just, it's just like, how many cockroaches are you going to allow in your kitchen cabinets? Three cockroaches per 100 food items in your kitchen? No. I mean, you see 1 cockroach, you're calling the guy, So I kind of feel that way about mites. I mean, it's kind of a trade-off where how much labor can I invest in this, I guess? But if you have time and you have the labor that you're willing to pour into it, 0 mites is great. I mean, that's just fabulous, but you're going to have to try to keep it below 3 mites per 100, I think.
Jennifer Faust asked another question. We have been checking hives every week for about a month and a half to destroy queen cells and cups to avoid swarming. There was no larvae or eggs in the cups this week. Can we quit doing this every week now to avoid swarming?
Wow. The swarm thing is funny because there's 2 types of swarms that we have. We have the overcrowded, overpopulated hive that swarms. And then you have the swarm that's instinctive reproduction. The bees want to reproduce and make another colony. And so sometimes, when they want to reproduce, gosh, you can't stop them. There's no way. They will outsmart you. But I think there's no way I could give advice on that, because if I did, the queen's going to maybe drop an egg in that cell tomorrow morning and raise a bunch of swarm cells. So you just don't know. You do have to kind of tell, like I can tell in my yards when they're done swarming. They're just done building those queen cells. They always have those cups around. Almost all colonies have queen cups. You see them in there, and they're just the emergency. They're prepared. They're there. And you're right. You do keep looking in there saying, oh, do they have an egg in there? Is there larvae in there? Do I need to tear that out or just leave it? And it gets to be laborious. Again, beekeeping is not for those that don't want to get in there and really do some hard work. It does take diligence, but I would say probably give it another couple of weeks before you can wipe your brow.
All right. Sharon asks, can you store the supers and frames outside when the temperatures are colder?
Oh yeah. The problem that I have in doing that is that I'll become unaware that they're out there. I'll forget they're out there, and I go into spring and it starts warming up, and all at once I have all these things. Now I try to make it tight enough where they can't do it, but I'll have all these things like small hive beetle or bumblebees or yellow jackets and all these other critters that are getting in between cracks in my boxes and making a mess in there. But I guess if you wanted to, you could kind of seal it off better and stack them up. And maybe when it starts to warm up a little bit, try to get them back in where bugs can't get in there.
from an anonymous attendee. Do you have a special recipe for the 1-to-1 syrup you feed in the fall, winter? I think you should add, do you add vitamins to this mixture?
Oh yeah, I do. I'm full disclosure on that, and it's nothing really special. And we do sell it actually in packages that's already made up, but it is nothing more than what you would know as the ingredients found in Honeybee Healthy, Amino Bee Booster, any kind of bee protein powder are the three ingredients. And I mean, it really doesn't matter. There's a lot of different, like Honeybee Healthy, those ingredients are under different names. Amino Bee Booster is under different kind of names. It's the same kind of ingredients, but it's under different names. Protein powders under a lot of different names, but it does need to be for bees. So those three things are the big hitters. And what I use is 1 teaspoon of each of those in 1 quart of 1-to-1 sugar water. So we follow that all the way through. We feed them that in the spring, we feed them that in the fall, and that's what goes into the winter bee kind.
Very good. Jennifer asked another question. How many frames of brood should you have in a 2-deep colony in October?
8 of them. So you'd want to see at least, you might have 5 in the bottom, 3 in the top. You might have 8 in the bottom, you may have 4, but I always go for 8. If I don't see 8, I'm not getting enough bees of winter physiology. That's right.
Another question from an anonymous attendee. Do you check brood boxes after you have 2 or 3 supers on?
Oh, well, you got to stay with your routine of inspection. So like, it's painful, but you've got to go out there every 2 weeks, drop your supers off, get down in there and make sure your queen's laying eggs every 2 weeks. And then you put it all back together. You do that on the next 2 weeks. Now on this once a month inspection, there again, supers are off. You're looking at the brood and you do a mite test. So you got to gather up bees, do a mite test, and look for diseases once a month. I always look for anything like European foul brood, American foul brood, anything that might be weird looking. I look for diseases once a month. But in between the once a month, I'm just looking for eggs, making sure the queen's healthy. But yeah, you do have to pull those supers off.
Ali Dringer asks, do you rotate out old frames to avoid pesticide buildup?
I think that's a great idea. I do it more based on, I just don't like old comb. Not so much pesticides, but I read some literature once that talked about each time that they make a pupa, that pupa makes a cocoon in there, spins a cocoon. Those cocoon layers make those cells smaller and smaller. And in between those layers, you can have American foul brood spores. So I'm not as much worried about American foul brood pesticides as I am foul brood diseases and dirty comb, I guess. So I like to have a routine where when I look at it, it looks really old. I can tell that my cells are getting smaller. That's usually 5 to 7 year old comb. I'll discard it. I'll either scrape it off of plastic, re-wax it, use them again, or sometimes I've ditched the frames because I've just got frames that I've got some frames that were probably Langstroth's frames back in the 1800s. I don't know where I get all this old stuff, but some of them are so old. Isn't it amazing the frames we have now are so well built compared to the frames that we started with? Oh my gosh, the frames we have now are tanks. When I started beekeeping, you could break a frame so easily, and that's why you have your hive tool to nail things back together. So today it's better to pop the plastic out and put new plastic in. That's a way to manage your combs.
Yep. I date each one of my frames with the year.
I've done that.
And about every 3 years rotated out.
Yeah.
All right. Aubrey asks, is having a swarm trap nearby a good reasonable way to deal with swarming?
It's a gamble. I think if a hive swarms and they go into that swarm trap you have, you should also go to Vegas that day because you are lucky. No, I think it, if usually they come with a little lemon smell. You can put that in there to attract them over there. It's the luck of the draw. Gosh, whether those bees really like that thing or not is that's all luck. But if they do like it, and they do go in there, then you have to get them out really quickly, or they'll start building comb in there, and then you've got to deal with that comb with brood on it into a hive. So if you put one of those up, don't go on vacation or something. You got to go out there diligently and watch it. But I would say just experiment, put them up there and see if they do work. It could be they do work. I've caught swarms in them, and a lot of my B Team 6 members have too. So they do work, but again, I've seen them set in trees 4 feet away from that thing and wonder why didn't they go in there,
Yep. John Rayner asks, a keeper can place a medium frame in a deep brood box. The bees will raise drones on the open spaces. I plan to remove the drone brood on the bottom of the frames every 20 days. Also, have you used green brood frames?
Yeah, that I do both of those. I don't always find that when you put a medium frame in a deep box that they put drone comb on the bottom. They don't always do that. I've had some they put worker brood. I've had some they make that into honeycomb, but they do. I know sometimes they are bigger. I don't want to tear that off necessarily, because when I use it, I usually find myself desperate for a deep frame. I don't have it, so I just throw a super in there and let them pull that out, and they blend it in really nicely, and I leave it that way. But to manage drones, I do like the green drone comb. I think that's what they ask. It is a good way to manage mites. It's one of the best ways. You take that green drone comb, let them pull it out. The queen measures the opening to be larger than 5, 6 or whatever millimeters. And then they put unfertilized eggs in there, and the mites jump in there because drones are in those cells longer. The drone is 24 days to mature to adulthood. So they get to stay in there 3 days longer to have more offspring, the mites do. And before they emerge, you freeze it all and kill all the mites. So that works really well.
Denise asks a question. I have several bumblebees hanging around my hives continuously. Anything going on there?
I wonder if they're bumblebees or carpenter bees. Oh, you've got a poster behind you. There's a bumblebee. Yeah, I have a lot of wooded structures around my property, and my carpenter bees are taking over. They're insanely populated around here. I don't have a lot of bumblebees. And I've kind of researched it. My carpenter bees don't care about my bees, and my bees don't care about the carpenter bees. They coexist and they don't really bother each other. So I would think bumblebees might probably not care that much about the bees. They're out there doing what bees do, gathering pollen, raising families and all. But I know yellow jackets and some of the wasps are more aggressive toward colonies.
Very good. What do you recommend to manage EFB, European foul brood, if a colony is tested positive?
Okay, I really think in European foul brood that you need to stick with the law on that. So you'd have to have an inspector come out, and if the inspector finds it, they have to issue a prescription for a treatment, and then you have to buy the treatment, turn that prescription into a larger bee company. They can send you the terramycin or whatever it is that I forget what it is now, but I think isn't it terramycin?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, European foul brood. And then you can treat it with that. It works really well, and it gets under control really fast. Like I said, we've seen it and we've treated it, and it's gone away very quickly in the spring. So that's what you need to do. Not sure about Missouri on your laws and all, but here in Illinois, some of the beekeepers have trouble finding a veterinarian that will make that prescription. They call a veterinarian, and the veterinarian says, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
Well, I don't do bees. Well, and you have to say, well, yeah, you do bees and you need to write me a prescription. It's kind of a hassle. A lot of people call us and say, I need a solution. I can't find anybody to write a prescription. And then I try to direct them over to our Department of Agriculture, the apiary division, and let them work that out. But you can treat it. I think that's the best way to do it, really. It's very contagious from hive to hive. So you need to knock it out. We used to say that you could take the queen out, let them requeen, and the nurse bees had time to kind of clean things up if you requeened it. A lot of times people say they threw a swarm on there. They caught a swarm, threw the swarm on that hive that's infected with EFB, and it cleared it up because there's more bees that kind of get things under control. But I just think it's important to stay on top of that because it does spread.
David Franz asks, what do you do with the partially filled honey frames from the supers in the fall?
I think it's important to get a refractometer and take a sample of that. Are they keeping it open? I mean, is it 18%? They just haven't capped it over because they're maybe don't want to yet or something. And if it's 18, 19, even 20%, harvest it. Maybe I think you ought to sample it from right inside the hive there before you make a decision that it's too wet. But yeah, if it is too wet and you've got some frames that are partially capped over with some nectar in there, I don't like to go through winter with, only 5 frames in a super and the other 5s have nothing in them because the bees may go up there and there's not a lot of food. So I usually pull them off and I store them. I'll freeze them, and I've got a real big freezer and I'll keep them in the freezer all year, frames like that. And then I break them out in the spring and I can put them in hives that need a little boost, or I'll put them back on the hive in the spring, just like they are. That will give them, that much ahead to fill that out for a whole full super. Once you freeze honey or nectar like that, it does not alter that nectar or honey at all. It's fine to freeze it.
And last but not least, this is just an informing statement from John Rayner. Consider to tell them that the basswood trees will start blooming this weekend, and mine are just loaded with blossoms.
Is that in Missouri?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. They are awesome trees. They make a lot of nectar. Amazing. Yep. Good.
And that is the last question. Thank you so much. All right. Bob, you want to wrap it up with David? Are you?
Well, I think we've about worn David out.
Yes.
That'd be hard to do. I had a good time.
Well, it's great, David, for you to, I would add, for those people who are interested in following up your main points, particularly related to varroa control, that you could go online to the website of the Honeybee Health Coalition, and there are 4 free pamphlets available for download that deal with varroa control. One, which is called Tools for Varroa Control, is now in its 7th edition, and it takes up a lot of these sticky questions, these good questions that Dave would ask about when and how and what can you do, what at this time of year, that time of year. There's some really great resources there. There's a decision guide, and there's also a new publication called BMPs for beginner beekeepers. And then this is sort of a sneak preview, but in a couple of weeks, the Honeybee Health Coalition is going to release about a 90-pager, which is a series of interviews with commercial beekeepers who are using chemical and cultural ways to stay on top of their mite problems and avoid using off-label products, which is not the hobbyist problem, but these interviews of some commercial beekeepers are very interesting. It shows the depth of which they've studied the same issues we're talking about. And then lastly, there's a free release that's just come out from the University of Minnesota. It's the 2nd edition of Marla Spivak's basic book on beekeeping. It's called Beekeeping in Northern Climates, second edition. And it's free for the moment. Now, these are only free for people who've already bought David's book. David's book is a great book. And you can't have enough beginner beekeeping books. I've got 2.5 shelves of beginner books, and I always learn something new. And they're affordable. And the more you read them, the easier beekeeping becomes for you. It's just the way to do it. And I know that's John Pasha's main point. So that's all I would have to add, I think, was that there are resources out there. But after you've heard David, I think you'd want to get his book.
Thank you.
Yeah, really, I'm going to. We might even get a whole bunch of them for the beginners class next year.
Yeah.
So that would be cool. Do we know, Michael, whether Kate Smith ever joined us?
I don't believe so, but Steve Rudolph is online and he can give the report about the Danford yard.
Great. That's terrific.
Okay. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Pleasure.
My pleasure.
Okay. Have a good evening.
Okay. Thank you.
Steve, are you there?
I'm here. Can you
All
hear
right.
me?
Yes.
I'm sorry I can't get the video to start. I was going to share with you. We just got the sampling back from the Sentinel Hive. I'm sorry, Bee Informed Partnership, and we looked at the hives on the 20th of May after they moved back to the bee yard there from Tim Hyde's house. And one thing we learned is you don't leave 2-inch spacers on top until May of the next year because they build all kinds of comb in there. But after we got all that straightened out, we were able to sample them, and the report came back with our 4 hives that we have selected: 0.4 hives for 100, 1.4, 0, and 0.4. So as far as the varroa control in the hives, it's doing pretty well. I think when we applied oxalic acid to them in December, that probably knocked down a lot of any remaining mites in there. And also, let's see, they also give us millions of spores for the cerame. And we have 0.3, 0.9, 0.05, and 0.3 million spores per bee. So I think we're in good shape right now with the hives. I'm sure that will change as we go forward into the rest of the year. The hives usually start adding more and more mites as the year goes on, but we'll stay on top of that.
Thank you very much, Steve.
You're welcome. Our next inspection is tomorrow afternoon. We'll be out there.
Very good. Well, it's 8:30. Is there any more comments or additions?
Michael, I've got one.
Yes, go ahead.
Someone contacted me this evening who needs help with a removal from the attic of a residence in Creve Coeur. And I have frequently referred calls of that kind to Dave Faust, who's a master builder and carpenter and beekeeper, but he was not available. And I know we have a list up on the website of members who are who wanted to be included, but in this case, because the person called me directly, I would say to the membership, if you're interested in handling a removal in Creve Coeur, could you please you could contact me. I think my phone number's on the website. So you could text me, or you could send an email to info@easternmobeekeepers.com if you would like to evaluate this situation and see if you can help this homeowner. For those of you who haven't done it before, beekeepers often provide this as a service, but as a fee-based service. I don't think people are expecting beekeepers to do this on a volunteer basis. So if anyone is interested, reach out, and it's a wonderful experience if you haven't done it before. So I guess we can wrap it up until our next meeting. But just to underline what Steve said, if you're in the mood to get into some colonies, tomorrow afternoon, Steve and Kate will be out there. And Steve, what time?
I believe we start at noon or 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock, I think. 1 to 4 or so. We'll go through all the Sentinel Hive boxes first, and then we'll do all the rest of the boxes.
So I know it's still a work day, but take a long lunch and go see the bees. Thanks everybody for attending, and Michael Godfrey and Mike Wagner, who stepped into this crazy technological jam and still managed to produce a meeting that held 75 or 80 people's attention. Thank you to you guys.
Welcome. Good evening, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you, David.
Yep, goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Have a good night.
Good job.